The number one book that I read this year, that's also been published this year in 2024, is... Today I'm going to be talking about my top books that I've read in 2024 that were also published in 2024. I'm also going to give the Barrel Award to the top book that I read at the end of this video. So please watch the whole video, but if you can't wait, then you can skip to the end and find out which book it is. One of the most enjoyable books I've read this year was called You Are Mine by Sister Anastasia. This is a memoir, and it's a very enjoyable memoir. There are many people dealing with forms of neo-paganism, psychedelics, all sorts of spiritualities that are not Christian because the human heart is seeking these things. And she went on this journey as an intellectual. Eventually, she arrives into encountering Christ in holy orthodoxy. I do want to share a little tidbit here at the end of her book, particularly if you're on the YouTube online world quite a bit. She writes, I started to feel that the online Christian content could have this double quality. On the whole, it is a force for good, and listening to talks would focus my mind on Christ and give me an opportunity to learn something new. But then after a few days, I would just feel so frazzled by the overload of visual, auditory, and intellectual information. Right before that, she writes, I aimed for silence so that I could better hear him, that is God, but often realized, usually after the fact, that I was fizzing in the white noise of too much sugar, YouTube, and mindless website scrolling. It was a struggle between focusing on Christ, who was to be met in the space between things, and the prince of this world, who was constantly trying to fill those delicate spaces with distractions. In the end, it doesn't matter what the devil is seducing you with, as long as he's seducing you with something. Then he is in control of your mind for as long as it is not focused on God. Wonderful book. It's geared towards a very wide audience, and it couldn't be any more pertinent today. Father Stephen DeYoung's book, St. Paul the Pharisee. This book really, it should be on every Orthodox Christian's bookshelf. It's very enjoyable. It engages the scholarship from a wide range on St. Paul, but it's geared towards a wide audience. So it's not scholarly language. What's so rich about it is it takes you to places like Antioch or Corinth. And so it's not just a biography of St. Paul, but it also takes you to like major cities in the ancient world and kind of helps you feel them out. And I've read lots of books that do that, lots of big commentaries. So what's nice is that you get all these things in a book like this. It would be great to see small groups at Orthodox parishes going through this book together. I think it would just be a wonderful thing. Another book that I'm about to mention, the Book of Acts Bible Study, A Walk Through the Book of Acts.
It ends with St. Paul throwing a snake into the fire. And I think without the church fathers, I never would have seen that, oh my goodness, that is such a typology of what the church is doing to the enemy.
You could go through this whole study with your kids and youth and then transition them to Father Stephen DeYoung's book on St. Paul. I think it's just a really nice pairing to help them really build a biblical worldview that's also orthodox and patristic, rooted in the fathers. It's filled with wonderful icons that the kids can interact with. So when they go to church, they're going to see these icons all over the walls. And because they've been learning not only about the book of Acts, but also how a particular icon relates to that story, they're going to see a whole storied cosmos when they enter into the church. This Bible study is a great way for you and your family to get very familiar with the Word of God. And I think you're going to really, really enjoy it quite a bit. Monastery and High Cross, The Forgotten Eastern Roots of Irish Christianity, written by Connie Marshner. Now, this book is really wonderful because it gets into like saints and liturgy and asceticism and monasticism and archaeology and all sorts of wonderful things, talking about how even the East, like Palestine and Egypt, deeply influenced the early practice of Christianity in Ireland. It's recommended by Frederica Matthews Green. This is what she writes. In Monastery and High Cross, Marshner gives us a zesty and intriguing portrait of Irish Christianity as it was before the Romans came. It was a faith that traveled over well-established trade routes, reaching Egypt, Constantinople, and points further east and returning over land and sea to the far west, land of Ireland. In the last 50 years, the archaeological evidence for this has blossomed, making this a fascinating story. I have found that many discussions happen in the Orthodox Catholic dialogues. A lot of that's sort of the Rome-Constantinople dialogue. And I think it's really helpful when you get into the historical sources for the far west, and I would say the Far East, because this gives us a fuller picture of Christianity. Another great work, and I almost gave it the Barrel Award, but there's just these decisions are so hard. Are We All Cyborgs Now by Raman Phillips and Joshua Pauling.
There's a lot of evidence that when teenagers have phones and their brains are still developing, it can permanently stunt frontal lobe function. The concern I have with comparing it to the Ring of Power is that, in a sense, that then absolves us from having to pass on good skills and virtues to our children. Because if we're just like, oh, it's like the Ring of Power and never touch it, then you're disincentivized to teach the skills, the virtues, the good habits that go into using it.
This book definitely fits the values of barrel-aged faith, and that is because I use the Wise Phone 2, which is a healthy smartphone. I am definitely passionate about helping people unplug from doom scrolling and from the machine and plugging into like prayer, but particularly a lifestyle of prayer in the woods and in the church, connecting with the Creator and the creation. There's a ton of helpful tips at the end on how parents can help their kids use technology responsibly. They give all sorts of examples in the book about how they're using it in their own lives, even as like educators. So this book is a combination of like philosophy, theology, sociology, psychology, technology, and then also just like parenting. So this book is loaded. It comes out at like 450 pages. This is almost kind of like reading like 3 books in one. This was a phenomenal book. I highly encourage people to check it out. I think this book would be really useful in courses in colleges. I think about my own college that I went to, Taylor University, an evangelical school. I remember them having an ethics and technology course, and this book would be perfect for a course like that. To my friend Robin Phillips, great work, phenomenal work. Definitely get your copy today. Another book that I enjoyed was by Michael Warren Davis called After Christendom. I think one of my favorite chapters was when he talked about St. Gregory of Palamas and how he really brought people who were breaking off of the Orthodox Church, he brought them back primarily not through apologetics, though he did some of that, but primarily through his holy lifestyle.
What Gregory did after spending time on Mount Athos, praying and fasting and being strengthened in his faith, he went up into the mountains and he met with the Bogomils. He debated with them. He defended the Orthodox faith. But what moved the Bogomils most was the fact that he was even more prayerful than they were. He fasted even more than they did. He was a holier man. He was a kinder man. So he would convert these secret villages. He would convert them back to Orthodoxy, and he would take their elders to Constantinople to be reconciled to the patriarch. And it was not his arguments that ended up winning the day. It was the example of his holiness. This is really what prevented Bogomilism forever taking hold in the Eastern Empire.
This is a good reminder that it's the way of beauty, the way of holiness. But of course, that always has to be paired with truth, which is the role of apologetics and evangelization and catechesis and all that. But the truth always must be carried by beauty and by love. And that comes through, of course, holiness and goodness. And so that was probably my favorite little section of the book. And so definitely think about purchasing his book. So thank you, Michael, for writing it. Again, a very rich read. The number one book that I read this year, that's also been published this year in 2024, is Rod Dreher's book, Living in Wonder. I think what I love about this book is it ties in everything that I've been sort of reading and enjoying over the last few years. He touches on Paul Kingsnorth, Jonathan Pageau. He's also engaging works, and this is probably my favorite book that this was actually my favorite book that I read in 2024, but it wasn't published in 2024. The Ethics of Beauty by Dr. Timothy Batistas. I had the privilege of getting to interview him a couple months back. With Jonah Martin.
The point of the city as liturgy, one of the points is that there's this very interesting type of city genesis where hermits make cities arise. So the hermit goes to the desert, or it could be, a remote wilderness, let's say in the Eastern European case in the Middle Ages. The hermit's holiness draws co-strugglers. The co-strugglers invite more, and then pilgrims. And then this becomes the ideal place in a dark age or in a time of social unrest and chaos to live, to be sort of under the shadow of holiness. So next thing you know, an entire city has grown.
And this is a phenomenal book. This was the number one book that I read this year. It's more of like a tome. It's like 800 pages. This book was just awesome. But what's fun is that Rod Dreher references Dr. Timothy in his book. Dr. Timothy's work is based on a beauty-first approach. And this is what he told Dreer in a personal interview with him. Dreer writes, "What does beauty first mean? It means to start with the why, to start with the goal, to start with the end in mind. Beauty first means to reason inductively, to pay attention to patterns and to living systems, and to welcome surprises." So mystery is a key there. Looking at the whole ecosystem and not just analyzing one of the little parts is very important to a beauty first approach. It's also very important to an Orthodox approach to understanding theology, and that's oftentimes missed in debates online, whether that be between Catholics and Orthodox, Orthodox and Protestants. There's something that's oftentimes missing that I think Dr. Timothy is able to like capture in his book. Zondervan published it, which is like a Protestant evangelical publisher. I went to an evangelical school, and our library was called Zondervan Library at Thiel University. And so them picking up on a book that talks about ancient apostolic Christianity, and it talks about saints, relics, exorcisms, the Eucharist, and he's very explicit, particularly towards the end, about Holy Orthodoxy. So to see this book being published by like an evangelical press like Zondervan is pretty cool. And it just kind of tells you where we are in society in this kind of conversation, how podcasting and YouTube is affecting how people think about theology, for good or bad. But I think overall it's helping people discover the church fathers. It's helping them discover the ancient liturgies. And all of these are good things, particularly if it leads them to a life of prayer and encountering Christ. What's really great about what Dreer does in all of his books is that he's a journalist. There's just so many like little interviews just kind of baked into it with like good storytelling. And he did a great job with that with Benedict Option. I really enjoyed How Dante Saved My Life. He's so good about weaving so many themes into one readable book, where it's like I could hand people all sorts of books and all sorts of YouTube videos, but somehow Dreer is able to capture the spirit of all that through interviews and journalism and storytelling, and also just like a life of prayer, and capture that into a book. So great job, Rod Dreer. Barrel Age Faith's best book of the year, published in 2024, though there were many books that came very close. So congratulations to all of the authors. It was an honor to read all of your books. Really enjoyed them. If you want me to interview you as an author, or you want me to send, you're welcome to submit a book to me and I can review it and read it, and we can do an interview, or I can do a book review, and it might make it into a short video, or it might make it into the end of the year awards. These are the books that were published this year that I've been able to read. There are others that I did too, but I couldn't talk about all of them today. But anyways, this is the big one. And I would encourage you to read it, pore over it, enjoy it. And of course, it also has some edge. I remember when Rod wrote Benedict Option, and people initially were like, "Oh, this is alarmist. This is crazy." Okay, there's things in this book that people might be like, because he does touch on like UFO stuff and demons and all sorts of things that could make people uncomfortable. There's things in this book that will make Protestants uncomfortable. There's things in this book that will make Catholics uncomfortable. There's things in this book that will make Orthodox uncomfortable. Roger is a journalist, and so he's going to share what he's been taking in over the years. And so I think overall, this book is good for people to read, and it's good for you to be challenged, good for me to be challenged. I do want to mention Michael Garton's books. I'm going to include this in the 2025 next December book review. So even though this book was published, I'm not including it in this video because I want to give it its fair due. It's a nice book, very well researched, and I've been encouraging people to get it. So anyways, I'm going to include this in the 2025 next December book review, and you'll find out if it wins the 2025 award or not. All right, guys. God bless. Have an amazing new year. 2024 has been such a blessing in my life. Thanks for all who follow this channel. Continue to pray for me. Looking forward to 2025, and it'll be a fun year, God willing. God bless. Bye-bye. The Wise Phone 2, which I currently use as my phone. It's an amazing phone that helps you not doom scroll or be addicted to social media and other vices, because it doesn't have a web browser, but it does function like a phone. You can call, you can text, you can take pictures, you can do videos. It even has apps like Uber and Lyft. You can order food, maps to get around town, all the things that you kind of need in this modern life. While at the same time, being able to have a boundary between you and work, or you and distractions, so you can be more present with your family, with your kids, with your spouse, whomever. This has been a very freeing experience for me to have the Wise Phone 2. Again, you can get $40 off through my discount code KING today.